Back again with another top 5. My name is Josh. Thanks for checking out the channel. And if you're checking out the channel, that means you're probably curious about the top 5 freakiest horror movies as a kid. I started thinking about this not that long ago, as my sister just had her first little girl, which makes me a new uncle, which means that at some point I'm going to be responsible for taking care and or babysitting this little girl, and it's going to be a big responsibility of me to make sure that I pick the correct horror movies to corrupt Salem with. Her name is Salem. Hey, Salem. So I started thinking back to my childhood, and I was trying to think of a list of like the top movies that really freaked me out to have maximum impact and make sure she has the most pleasant dreams. The world's a hard place. Everybody's got to be ready at all times, especially in your dreams. So I started thinking about all the movies that really kind of horrified me as a kid, and it's such an interesting list because I started thinking about it in different times of childhood, and what I'm going to end up doing is I think I'm going to end up doing a series of different videos related to this one in different time frames. So, for instance, this one, I'm going to try and keep this one kind of preteen, before you're really going out seeing movies by yourself or doing anything like that. These are all going to be movies that I was either taken to, seen on TV, or rented way too early in my life. Made me the paranoid person that I am today, and I absolutely love it. Eventually I want to get to ones that scared me throughout most of my adult years as well, and or just the ones that I think are the scariest in general. So more lists will be coming up, but what I'm going to do today is really just kind of count down the top 5 in no particular order, because I don't know if there's one that specifically caused me more fear than others. I know ones that are way better movies, and the thing about this list is they're not necessarily all going to be straight horror movies. You'll see when we get there, but basically they're going to be the ones that had some scenes or some really weird content that just really messed with my head and really made me sleeping and or going into certain areas of the house or into the, dark. Really challenging. So what I'm going to do is try and give you a little insight into why I think that's the scariest for me. So we're just going to go through the movies. I'm going to try and tell you the scenes that really stuck out to me and or something that may have happened in my life at that time or around that time to really cinch that fear into the nightmares that'll be there forever probably in my head at some level in there. So like I said, we're not really going to have a specific order to this one because they're all pretty freaky in their own right, but we're going to go ahead and start out with a 1993 classic. I think this one might top a lot of people's list, or at least some scenes in this one, but this is Fire in the Sky. So if you haven't seen Fire in the Sky, this was a super creepy movie that is loosely based, I guess, depending on who you talk to, on an alien invasion story that happened in 1975 in Arizona. That was a group of loggers that were out working, and they were getting done with work, and basically they saw a light in the sky, or fire in the sky, hence the name. They went to investigate it. One of the guys got out and decided to get really close and basically disappeared. Then from there, all the other guys had to figure out what to do and how to explain what happened to their missing friend. And it became this whole big to-do, and there's a lot of truth to this that, people really thought they killed him. They hid the body in the woods, things like that. But then eventually, I can't remember exactly if it was like a week later or, 4 or 5 days later, he just showed up in the middle of nowhere and found like a payphone. Payphones are those things they used to have where you had payphones to call for help. And then basically he was just reliving and kind of recounting his story. Why that one was so freaky to me was, again, at the time when I watched it, 1993, I probably watched it when I was 11, maybe 12, something in that range. We're pushing the top of the age for this specific list that I wanted to get to. But I remember that one and knowing that there was something about it being based on a true story, and a lot of it seemed very logical, and I read a whole bunch of books and stories about aliens growing up. Yeah, I think my mom for actually most of these things. She's going to be incorporated in a couple of the stories too. But anyway, he disappeared, and it was basically trying to figure out what happened. It was a lot about his recounting of what happened, and that's what got me. So this one tops that list because of the fact that if you've seen the movie, you'll know there's a scene where he wakes up after being abducted, and he's got all kinds of tubes and things in him. He's in like a jelly cocoon kind of thing, and he's just breaking out, and he's trying to get out of there, and for some reason, I think up until that point, the 80s and, some of the 90s were really good at getting a lot of kids very interested in outer space. I wanted to be an astronaut for a long chunk of my life, but it's also very terrifying. But they didn't really show as much of the terrifying stuff. You look at E.T. and you look at Mac and Me and all the other, Flight of the Navigator, Explorers. There's a bunch of movies out there that really highlighted all the cool stuff to do with aliens. This was one of the first ones that I remember being like, oh my God, what if this is really like what happens when they abduct us and they're testing us? And it just caused me to have horrible and very vivid nightmares for a long time. Yeah, maybe still a little bit every once in a while if I'm watching that one before I go to sleep. And let me just tell you, I do not watch that one right before I go to sleep, even to this day. It was a good movie, great story, scarred me for life. Moving on from there is another kind of interesting one in the fact that it's not straight horror. So this one is actually the 1982 classic, I use that term loosely, Beastmaster. So this is a fantasy sci-fi movie. If you've ever seen it, you'll know exactly what it is. It spawned a TV series, I believe, afterwards as well on Sci-Fi Channel, along the Hercules line. It was a good fantasy, sword and sandals kind of movie. It came out around the same time like Conan was coming out and a couple of other movies, and it had the same feel to it. Overall, it was a really cool movie. I mean, the story in of itself, to keep it brief, there's basically evil wizards that are trying to take power over this kingdom, and they end up switching this prince's body at birth with a cow. I know, it sounds really weird, and it is. And basically, he is born with the ability to communicate with all the different beasts around. So he can talk to birds, he can see through their eyes. I mean, he's got like a tiger that kind of is his sidekick that comes with him everywhere. It's very handy. So, I mean, there's a lot of cool fantasy stuff. I mean, there's a lot of magic, there's a lot of wizards, there's a lot of witches, there's monsters, like all over the place. It's out there, and I really enjoy those because I really did like those movies growing up. But this one specifically had several things in it that just, for some reason, it crossed the line with me, and it just kind of turned into those are the things I thought about in this movie when I was going to sleep. A couple of them I already kind of talked about. The whole reason that this person, or the Beastmaster, is able to really communicate with all the beasts around is because his mother, while she was pregnant with him, asleep in her bed, the evil wizards came there and switched, somehow, via magic, him with a cow, like a baby calf. So he was born out of the cow, and then the baby calf was now in his mom, and it just like, the cool practical effects. You had this baby cow basically just growing in the woman, and then she just died. She died from that, so that really kind of screwed me up to begin with. They had these weird ring-like things that had eyeballs on it that were always kind of looking and keeping track of you, weirded me out beyond belief. But the big thing was there were these monster things that they actually ended up being kind of on the good side, but they were terrifying. They were like human-sized bats that didn't really have mouths, but they would come up like this. They never said anything. They'd wrap around you with their wings, and then they'd just show a whole bunch of movement, and then a bunch of bones would drop out. They would liquefy you. They literally would eat off every bit of soft tissue on your body in like a half second. It was gnarly, and I don't know why, but that horrified me. Other than that, though, it was good sci-fi. Enjoyed that. Next one we get to is definitely, it's a little bit of a cheat when we're talking about movies, but we're definitely getting more to the actual straight-up horror, and that is, it was the It miniseries. So this was actually a TV movie miniseries that, I don't remember if it spanned over, I think there were 2 volumes, or maybe it was like 4 VHS tapes. They were some big ones. But this came out in 1990, and I'm pretty sure I seen it as it came out, so that means I was pre-10. We're talking 8, 9 years old in that range, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it, but it just lingered so much, especially at night in different situations. And if you've seen that one, and I'm sure I'm not unique in the fact that Pennywise, I really love the new It and the new Pennywise as well, but Tim Curry as Pennywise was just so fantastic. I mean, I knew Tim Curry from a lot of other things even growing up, and I don't even know if I really realized that was him. There were so many instances where that one just creeped me out beyond belief. I mean, all the different balloons with blood, like just the blood use in general in that one kind of weirded me out with the drains and all kinds of stuff. But there were definitely a couple specific scenes that really just kind of stuck in the old head as soon as the eyes closed to go to sleep. And a lot of it had to do with like even the pictures of Pennywise when they started to come to life and he would be moving around. I thought that was such a cool effect, but it was really, really creepy. The other two specifically that really got me was one, the werewolf scene in the boiler room or in the basement of the school. I've always been terrified of werewolves. I really like them a lot, but I'm terrified of them, so that one just really brought a whole bunch of things together. I don't know if I'd watched a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street at that point, but maybe I had, and there was, it was just a big whammy for all the boiler room basement stuff. That was creepy. But the one scene that really just stood out so much was actually the shower scene at the high school where Pennywise comes up out of there. That just terrified me forever, and I never really used the school showers because of that. I did when I absolutely had to make sure that I was going to pass and not have to come back, but other than that, I would avoid those things, and I would walk around them in big circles. Still to this day, I don't like a lot of those drains. It just terrified me. There were a lot of other things in that movie that were scary, but that one specifically, I just remember it crossing over to the daytime hours, and especially when I was in school.
I enjoy
The next one is a 1988 classic, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That's right. This is another clown movie. I never really thought that I have a thing or fear of clowns, because I can see clowns and be completely fine with them, but there was just a lot of creepy clowns growing up, and this one was no exception. And I know what you're thinking, and if you didn't see this one growing up, and if you've seen it more recently, you're going to be like, are you kidding me? It's such a B horror movie, and it's not really that scary. I don't think that's true at all. I still watch that one and still get creeped out at certain things, but I know it's because of the associations that I have with it. So if you haven't seen it, Killer Clowns from Outer Space is basic B horror movie where you have stereotypical guys and girls trying to make out, and then you have an alien ship that lands that just kind of looks like a big clown tent or circus tent, and you have this wide array of clowns that come out. The clown special effects and the costumes that they have are stellar. I'm a little biased just because I'm also a huge fan of Ernest Scared Stupid. They used a lot of the same makeup artists on that one. A lot of the trolls looked exactly like some of the clowns, and I loved it. But the clowns were super creepy, still super vibrant colors, but they just look like there's something really wrong with them, because there is. But anyway, the clowns get there, they start invading, and then through various different means, they kill a whole bunch of people, and then they capture a whole bunch of people to eat them, and there's just a lot of different scenes that make this one pretty horrifying. Specifically in this one, what really made this one horrifying to me was at the time when this one came out, I was really pretty young, and when we started watching it, and at the time my mom was either doing night school or she was working an evening job, so she would get home much later in the evening, so oftentimes us kids would hang out a little bit later, we'd watch some movies, stay up and wait for her to get home, like on Fridays and Saturday nights and stuff like that. And I remember this being one of them, and there's a couple of scenes in this one, for some reason just really crawled into the psyche. I mean, there's the scenes where they're going from door to door, ringing the doorbell. When they open up, they're basically attacking. You had different kinds of things. You had pizza boxes, but they all ended up having these little guns that would spray you, and they would wrap you in kind of like a cocoon of cotton candy. The problem is then you get liquefied inside from that, and you get drank. So we would always be sitting in bed waiting for her, and then as soon as like a doorbell rang, or we could hear the door opening, and naturally that would just be what I would think it is. Luckily, my mother, being the super compassionate person that she is, I'm just kidding, she's very compassionate, but she had her moments. She would also act like she was not our mother. She would just turn around and act like, who are you? I don't know where you are. And for some reason, that was always associated with Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Maybe even a little Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a little crossover with them. But I just remember there were so many scenes in this movie that terrified me as a kid. A lot of it had to do with either being liquefied and then drank through a really crazy straw, or being used as like a puppet. There was a part where the sheriff actually got murdered, and then an alien jammed a hand up him so that he could use him like a marionette or like a puppet and talk. It was horrifying. Really creepy. Still kind of creepy.
Doing it at a theater near you.
And the last one, but definitely not the least, I say they're not in any specific order, and they're really not, but this one still probably is the scariest. It's also probably, no, there's no probablys, it is one of my favorite movies, and that's Jaws. So, the original 1975 classic Jaws, actually, and some of the sequels, I was young. They were still scary to me back then. But the original one was super creepy. That's just a different caliber and quality of movie altogether. I mean, I think, again, it might be one of, if not my favorite movie that I've seen, and I absolutely love it, but it absolutely terrified me as a kid, and still to this day sometimes. I just watched it again not too long ago, and there's scenes that are still terrifying. I mean, there was a lot left to the imagination, not even on purpose necessarily if you watch the behind the scenes, but it just worked out fantastically, so you're just in charge of a lot more of that, and I think that the creation in our heads are going to be a lot scarier than what they can put out on camera, especially in 1975, but lo and behold, when they did, horrified me. There were several scenes that really scared me. I mean, it's the unknown and the dark ocean and all of those things. There's like the jump out scenes where they find Ben Gardner's boat, and then, they find a dead Ben Gardner. There's the scene in the lake where the dude gets his leg bit off completely, where it's like kind of like the first time you see kind of the big outline of him. It's just horrifying. But a lot of the most scary things to me came when it was the three of them, going after the shark, and the boat starts to sink, and the shark crashes through the boat and is really just bringing it down. I mean, there's so many terrifying things in that one, but why that one specifically, to me, is so scary is I remember not long after seeing it for the first time, I was at a friend's house for a sleepover. Sleepovers are so much fun. except this one. I just remember it was the fun, the stereotypical sleepover. You go for somebody's birthday or just having a good time. You got some pizza, you got some movies you're watching. You're sleeping, camped out on the floor, a lot of sleeping bags or blankets and pillows, all that kind of stuff, which is exactly what we did. And one of the movies that we put on right towards the end of the night was Jaws. It was kind of playing as we went to sleep. And one of the things that this person had in their house was they had a big fish tank right next to where we were sleeping. And at some point in the night, one of us, not saying who, was sleeping and accidentally kicked that and broke it and had a bunch of water just come flashing out of that. So there I am, just gone to sleep. I'm listening to Jaws in the background as I'm trying to sleep. And then all of a sudden there's a rush of water that comes over me. Do you think I had some freaky nightmares that night? Absolutely. Did it wake me up? Not even. I woke up the next morning, we all did, just like, why are we so wet? I don't know what happened. It was pretty fantastic, actually, but absolutely scarred me for life. I mean, after that, I don't think I was even able to swim in swimming pools without imagining there being a shark behind me, which really did help me try and go for speed when I was learning to swim. Anyway, so that's really the top 5 that I could come up with that really scarred me for life as a younger child. Most of those movies I still actually really enjoy and will go back and watch, with the exception of Fire in the Sky. I don't need to see that anymore. That one may be a little too close to home, if you know what I mean, or too close to true. Anyway, let me know in the comments section. Have you seen these movies, especially when you were younger, and how did they affect you? Also, I'm very curious what movies may have had that effect on you that I didn't have on my list. I definitely want to do some more lists, and I know I'm leaving some out, so there may even be a sequel to this list, because I watched a lot of horror movies growing up, and I was pretty terrified most of the time. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Go hit that subscribe button if you would. That'd be fantastic. And as always, you're awesome. Peace out.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.